This next section builds upon the last one, which is overgeneralization. Talked about it in that terms of that nobody can be happy context. Here, I just want to drill down and notice the function of those totalizing words. Always, never, not at all. These vague generalizations that, again, make it hard to talk to one another. So then I notice this more when I do my marriage therapy practice. So you notice when couples like really get into arguing, or families, or whatever, wherever the intimacy is close and the friction is, therefore very hot when arguments happen, you'll notice a lot of that. You never loved me. Not, I don't know if you loved me, you love me anymore. You never loved me. You're always playing board games with your friends. You spend all of your spare money on games. You never pay attention to me and my needs, ... yada, yada, yada. And so just as a practical tip for folks out there, look at that. Look at your use of those words, and you can actually improve the quality of your discussions and arguments with your loved ones just by noticing that particular bucket of words, the always and never, etc. Tip for you. So when it comes to the board gaming space, I noticed that the overgeneralization applies a lot to the topics of grace and forgiveness. Quote, "The issue is that you can never satisfy the woke. They will always have something to say, as every single one of them wants their pound of flesh. The reason the designer is standing up and not changing anything is because the woke demands never end." So the topics of grace and forgiveness and satisfaction, who's happy with what, when, these are huge emotional topics. They're very important to me. I'm very happy to continue conversations about them down the line. What I wanted to focus on here, though, was this idea that we never offer forgiveness and we're always looking to punish and all this kind of things, led the designer in this case and the commenters that supported that designer to not even try to offer any kind of olive branch for whatever faux pas happened. So when it comes to the specific topic of overgeneralization, the way forward on that is to try to get into the individual cases. The mechanism of overgeneralization is to look at a thing and then globalize it. So like, it didn't work out this time, so it will therefore never work out. And we got to be honest, especially when it comes to this grace and forgiveness stuff. There are cases where integration hasn't been easy and hasn't happened yet. And it's like, it's really sad. And I don't like when, these divisions persist, when these harms happen and we can't get it together. That has happened. However, there have been times where people make their faux pas and they're able to kind of figure out how to get that reintegration they need. And, it kind of blows over at the end of the day. Either people forgot it and moved on, or there's been a real coming together. And those examples exist too. I think of it like red lights while driving. It's like if we're really angry, oh my God, every stop was a red light. But then you look at it, there's red and there was some green in there too. So when we're looking at any case where we're starting to get into the always and the every, look at it and it's like, okay, am I really saying something real, or am I taking particular cases and globalizing them out and overgeneralizing and shutting myself down to the possibility of moving forward? So another way in which overgeneralization plays out in our discourse is gatekeeping. Now, I know it's very much a left turn from the previous subject, but the underlying mechanism is very, very similar. Think about it. So in the previous subject where it's like, okay, SJWs are never forgiving, they're taking certain circumstances and globalizing them out as hard and fast rules that happen every single time. Overgeneralization. Let's transfer that to what happens when a conversation goes the gatekeeping route. We're figuring out who's in and who's out. How do we do that? We overgeneralize the definition of a game. Usually for the sake of somebody's comfort, or, they like the way it is and they want to keep the space familiar and in a way that works for them. Anyway, it's not a game, it's an activity. So I have taken one aspect of a game. I've taken, usually when it comes to hobby gaming, the decision making and the choices and the meaningful, activity that I do in a game. If it's not meaningful, if there's no stakes, then what am I doing? It's just structured, silly fun. And as content creators, we actually don't help all the time. You see my wall of games over there, but I also down here have the silly stuff too. The stuff that isn't regarded as a game, right? And because, along the way, I've tried to become aware of the thinking habit at the heart of gatekeeping, this overgeneralized sectioning off, defining down, and then excluding anything that doesn't fit in that definition. It keeps going. Board games are inherently social. Why in the world would anyone want to play a solo game? Solo gamer, I deal with this all the time. That's how I got my start in board gaming content creation, is in the solo gaming end, and I face that gatekeeping aspect all of the time. And you see the aspect, games are inherently social. And I've done a video on this. Games are historically social, but that's not the same as inherently social. Now we're taking a term and we're using it to define a game in a very closed way. And this one actually came up on Twitter, not relative to board games, but in terms of D&D, but it leapt out at me. Wow, I have to talk about this. D&D is all about leveling up and getting powerful, so it can't do good horror stories very well. It's role-playing. How can we say that a certain game system doesn't do horror or whatever genre very well? I get it. Horror is a thing where you want the PCs to be all small and, scared of the big bad monsters or whatever it is. But if it's all about leveling, I could, as a DM, introduce a big scary monster that level drains. What? All along the way where, we have to be careful of that instinct. And a lot of the discourse, I find, ends up kind of talking about the moral aspect of it. It's wrong to gatekeep. Please don't, you're being mean to people who are, not in that center of the hobby. And that becomes a very attacking thing. I would rather, in that conversation, get below and not so much talk about the expression of the thought, but the thought itself. The thought that game is inherently a thing, right? So then you'll get the counter argument sometimes. Well, if I don't define game, then it could just be anything. You want to call anything a game? You want to sit there and sip your coffee and call it a game? It triggers, once again, some of the stuff I've talked about before. Catastrophization, black and white thinking. Either a game is this or it's anything. Noticing how these thought distortions, cognitive distortions on an individual level, and dialogue distortions on a communal level, how they play out and reinforce one another is really important. Hopefully, as this case builds, you're seeing the applications in your own discourses.